Hi folks, it's Brenda and this is OTD 550 week 3, and I'm going to give you a Cliff's Notes version of the PowerPoint for this week just as a way of having an extra study guide. So we're talking this week about how do we find evidence, or how do you search the literature. It's a little bit different when you're searching the literature for a research study than when you're just, say, writing an undergraduate research paper. You need to find all the literature pertaining to a particular topic, not just the first article that pops up on Google Scholar. So we're going to do a little reviewing with this PowerPoint, and then I'm also going to do a separate video where I'm going to try to show you some different ways of searching that you can use as a review as well. So this week we hope to learn several methods of how to locate literature that gives us evidence for practice. And then we're going to begin to critique and select which studies are pertinent to our own research topics. Have some announcements here. I will not read those right now. You may stop the recording and look at those if you need to. So the very first thing you need when you are doing a research literature review is a background question and a foreground question. The background question is just a broad question about the topic, and I'm using as the example, what is OT's role in hospice care? Now, what's helpful is if you can find some Pearl literature. This is kind of what you're looking for with your background question. One article or maybe a couple of articles that helps you think about your question in a little bit more depth. Then you're going to narrow this down to a foreground question, which you've heard called a PICOT question, or a PICOT question, depending on how you pronounce it. And in this case, we can see how this is so much more specific than our background question. So after perusing the literature a little bit, we're going to come up with this question that says, in hospice patients and their caregivers, will OT intervention for ADL adaptive equipment compared with no OT intervention result in an outcome of decreased reports of discomfort during ADLs and increased quality of life after 2 weeks ADL adaptive equipment use? So you can see how much more specific that is. You can also break that down into what are the PICOT parts. So P is the patient population. So what is that in this case? It's the hospice patients and their families. Intervention or issue, it is how can we help them be more comfortable, and could adaptive equipment be that intervention that would work for them, compared to no intervention. And the outcome would be decreased pain, and over how much time or by when. So after 2 weeks of ADL equipment use, can people report that they have decreased pain or better endurance, or whatever we decide that question will be. I'm including this chart that is from Stillwell, one of the articles that was your assigned reading this week, because it talks about the different types of questions. PICOT or PICOT is sort of the main one, and it's often used when we're looking at intervention. How does this intervention impact a particular outcome? It also looks at etiology. Are people who have this compared to people who don't have this condition at a greater risk for this particular problem over time? So are people who are on hospice care at greater risk for experiencing ADL decline than those in the general population, just for example. A PICO question without the T could be diagnostic tests. Determine which test is more accurate. So this could be in children with sensory integration dysfunction, is the SIPT test compared with the HELP test more accurate in taking a look at their sensory integration function? Which one's more accurate? So that would be the PICO comparison. Prognosis or prediction. So this would be, you could be looking at like family influence or something like that. And meaning could be a PIO without the T, or could be a PIOT question. Understanding the meaning of an experience. How do people with terminal illnesses perceive their ADL function during end-of-life care? That would be a different question entirely. So you can see how getting specific with our foreground question is going to narrow our research search, our literature's review search, to something that's a little more manageable for us, rather than looking at all the information ever that has occurred in regard to OTs in hospice care. So what do we need next? We need some keywords or mesh terms. No, you are not ready to search yet. You shouldn't be grabbing your Google Scholar and just diving in. You need to be looking at what are the keywords. Take keywords from your PICOT question. Also borrow the keywords from your Pearl article. So that article that you found that helped you think more deeply, possibly this is an article that your research instructor gave you. So this is how you can further your search in that way. Now there are some databases that use what's called controlled language terms. So Medline or PubMed uses these medical subject headings or mesh terms, and you will get a more accurate search of that particular database if you use their terms. For example, when searching for fall prevention in Medline, if you use the keyword fall prevention, you'll get some stuff. But if you go and use their terms, accidental falls, and combine it with older adults, you will get a more accurate search. CINAHL, another database that is commonly used by occupational therapists, uses something called subject headings. The next thing you're going to do is select your databases. The last thing you want to do is select all the databases that the library has available to you. You're going to get a whole lot of stuff that has nothing to do with your topic. You'll get a whole lot of duplicates. You really want to search one database at a time. If you're doing a keyword search, I'll allow 2 or 3 at a time, but honestly, you will get a better result if you're searching just a few at a time. I would also caution you from steering far, far away from Google Scholar unless you know exactly what it is they're looking for, because it is not a complete database. The thing that you did in undergrad where you would just go to Google Scholar, plug in a couple of keywords and look at the top 5 things that popped up and use them to proof text whatever article you were writing about is not acceptable when it comes to a literature review for research purposes. You need to be finding all the information about a particular topic, and Google Scholar is not going to have that for you. Another thing, when you are doing your literature searches, do not tell me that you are searching EBSCOhost as a database. It is not a database. It is a platform for databases. It's kind of like saying you searched, Google. Google doesn't just search by itself. It goes and looks at specific websites. It's a platform for searching. EBSCOhost is a platform for searching. It is not the database itself, okay? So the database is the collection of articles that CINAHL has collected or that Medline or PubMed has collected, okay? And EBSCOhost is just think of it like a TV channel. It's the channel where it's hosted. Like Netflix is the channel where it's hosted, but it's not all the episodes of your favorite show that you want to see. Okay? Some very familiar ones for occupational therapy are Medline, CINAHL, ERIC, which is more of a liberal arts search base, so it kind of depends on what you're looking for. That may be one that you want. Or PsycInfo, again, something that could be useful to you if you're looking at a mental health question. Okay? The other thing that we want to do as occupational therapists, in addition to searching CINAHL and Medline, is going to look at the single journal website and databases searches. Why? Because articles that have come out within the past year are not going to be on Medline and CINAHL. You need to go to the actual journal website in order to search for those things. So AJOT, Canadian Journal, British Journal, and Australian Journal, Occupational Therapy Journal of Research. These are all available through AOTA, and I'll be showing you those on the searching video that I'm going to be doing. Okay, those are listed in your searching steps document. You can find that on Brightspace, and those are going to help you find the articles that are pertinent to your particular topic. You also want to look at Cochrane reviews. So Cochrane reviews are collections already ready created for you regarding certain topics. For example, I was looking at Cochrane reviews for hospice didn't turn up a lot, but when I went to palliative care, about 15, 20 articles popped up, I think it was actually more than 100. I could cruise through those articles and take a look at what might be most pertinent to the types of things that I am looking for. The fourth thing that you need to do is look at your filter. So let's say that I searched occupational therapy and palliative care on a keyword search on CINAHL, and I came up with 5,000 hits. That's too many. I'm not going to look through 5,000. So now I can filter by the past 5 years of publication. I might be looking at adults only. I don't want pediatric articles. Do not, let me repeat this, do not limit yourself to full text, because our library can get anything in full text for you within about 48 to 72 hours, which is another good reason to start early. But you don't want to limit yourself to full text only, because you're only going to have things pop up that full text is available through the database. And that is not going to give you everything that's available. And you want to find everything that's available. I will allow it for you to limit yourself to English, because I doubt if you're going to be using Google Translate for the articles that come up in Portuguese, even though the Brazilian Journal of OT is actually a really good one. But I don't speak Portuguese, so unless those articles are already translated, they're not going to be particularly helpful for me. Peer-reviewed journal articles only. You don't want books to come up. Those are harder to deal with. They're longer to go through. And usually books are secondary sources anyway. The primary information is going to be in the research articles. Okay, so you're going to be looking at journal articles, not popular press publications as well. Fifth, use your Boolean operators to good use. These are our or, and, or not. So these are the buttons on the left of the search page, and they're usually suggested, and I think the default is usually and. So if I put in occupational therapy and I put in hospice, it'll search for those with and. But I could also put in not pediatric if I wanted, although that's actually easier to do with a filter. Okay, finally, you're ready to search. I like selecting a field that says all text rather than just leaving it sort of search everything. Why? Because it narrows it down to looking at what's actually in the article, not to things that are written in the margins or things that are in advertisements that are next to the article, things like that. All right, then you hit search. You are now searching one database in EBSCO, which is the host search platform that UIndy pays to use. Okay, there are others. We use EBSCO. Every time you do a search, use the search documentation form. Write down the result, how many hits did you get, and then if that's like all you need because you know you've got to filter more, stop at that. Just how many hits did you get when you search these terms in this database in this way, and then you move on to the next term. Why? Because we need to be able to repeat our searches. Okay, you can also save your searches, and I'll be showing you how to do that. But we need to be able to have our searches be reproducible. For one, 2 years from now, when you go back to add to your data, you can simply redo the searches that you did and then see what comes up new within the 2 years that have since transpired. But wait, there's more. So don't forget, we had a background question that helped us find some keywords and a Pearl article. Then we have some foreground questions. We pull out our search terms using our PICOT question. We choose our databases. We search them one at a time. We use filters and Boolean operators. Okay. Now, you need a systematic plan to search the literature. This is where it's going to help to have a team, because you're going to search in a whole bunch of different ways. All right. The first way is a hand search. So grab that Pearl article that you have from your background search and take a look at the references. More than likely, you're going to find some articles that you're going to want to peruse that are along the same topic, that are going to be similar to the type of study that you want to do. Okay? You can also use the mesh or subject headings that that article used and use those for your search parameters. And don't forget, every time you change your search parameters, write it down so that you can reproduce it later. You can also look at the Pearl article and search for the author's names to see if something comes up that's similar. Oftentimes people have a research agenda and they've done a series of articles on a topic. Then you're going to look at the references in the Pearl article and you're going to search for those as well, which we talked about a little bit earlier. And don't forget, document each time you do a search so that you can reproduce what you did, and so that when you come back 3 days from now, you can kind of start where you left off and not reproduce what you had already done. Okay. So the next layer of a hand search, once you find other articles, you might be doing the same thing again, looking for other articles by that author, looking for other articles in the references of that same article, or looking at the search terms that that article listed as keywords. Okay. You might go on to a third layer, but I would set a limit as to how long you do this because you can go down a rabbit hole and you want to be able to move on and do some other kinds of searches. And again, don't forget, document each time you search. Step 2 is a faceted search. This is actually a little more deliberate than a keyword search. Serendipitous, or just plugging in some keywords in Google Scholar, that's called a serendipitous search. A keyword search is maybe a little more precise than that, but a faceted search is even more precise than a keyword search. You don't want to skip this step because if you do, you might decide, oh, there's not any evidence on our topic, and just move on from there. A faceted search will help you find out that there are, tens of thousands of articles on your particular subject. You just need to combine it with some other searches in order to narrow it down a little bit. This is a step, if you get really, really stuck, you can ask a librarian. I'm telling you, those reference librarians over at the Granite Library are bored. They're looking for things to do. Go give them something to do. They'll enjoy working with you. If you walk in and just say, do my search for me, they're not going to do it. But if you say, hey, I want to do a faceted search, here's some keywords I have, can you help show me the steps to do that? They'd love to do that. Okay, going to start with your PICOT literature search foreground question. Here's our very specific question, this time looking at adults with non-malignant acute pain, looking at guided imagery, compared to just using medication alone. How does that affect pain ratings within 3 days from hospital admission? And I'll let you break that down into the PICOT parts. You can do it, but it's so much more specific than what can we do to decrease pain, right? We're looking at guided imagery now, which is an intervention that OTs can do. So now, with a faceted search, you're going to use one keyword in. You can use several databases at a time or just one database at a time. One keyword, one search. Then you use the second keyword, not combining it yet, but second keyword, one search. Then you go to the search history, which you can find on the left under recent, and you're going to combine the two searches. And now you can see how many articles you have. Now you can start adding filters one at a time, until you get it narrowed down to about 100 articles, and then you can start to look through them. And you can pretty quickly, with 100 articles, tell, oh, you know, these ones are not important to me, but these few are going to be great. Then you can bookmark or save the articles that are applying to your search in question. Okay? There is a way to export the search that you're doing using Zotero. I'm not going to go there because I feel like that's... I don't want to spend our time like dealing with how to use technology, but it's up to your team and your research advisor if you want to use that method. But if you're not using Zotero, you're going to want to find a different way to find saving the articles that you have, so that you can compare with the rest of your team, so that if someone else finds the same articles as you, you're not duplicating work eventually. Okay. I think this is a repeat of an earlier slide. Okay. Yep, sorry, I went backwards. Okay. I recommend that you use the first author's last name, the year, and the abbreviated title to keep track of where your articles are. So I would name my article Smith 2025. OT Interventions in Hospice Care Systematic Review might be my title. That way I know at a glance what this article is, and I can tell, what it's from. You could also put your last name at the end of it. Smith, 2025, OT Systematic Review, Howard, and that way I know that I'm the one who found the article. Okay. Repeat the above search for each keyword set and each database that your team has agreed to search. It's very systematic. Okay? So, Here's an example: hospitalized patients and pain in CINAHL, hospitalized patients and guided imagery in CINAHL, and then you continue with each keyword set and database or database group as you progress through your search. Okay, keyword and Boolean operators. This is probably the kind of search you're most used to doing. This is where you just plug in a few keywords. You use the Boolean operators and or not to combine things. I do recommend you use only 2 terms at a time and that you use alt text to make sure you're capturing everything. Do not search all the databases at once. Search your databases one at a time and use a select few. Otherwise, you will get overwhelmed. And you have to record each time. Why do you need to do that? Just like we said before, so that you can reproduce it. Okay. So, subject heading and mesh terms, this is much like keyword searching, but instead of using your terms, you're going to use their terms. You have to take this step because there could be articles that are in a quote, hidden file drawer because you didn't search using their terms. So, Medline, you use mesh terms. CINAHL, you use subject heading terms. You can use these with faceted searches or Boolean operator searches, meaning keyword searches as well. Either way you go, just make sure you're documenting how you do it. But make sure you take this step as well. So let me repeat that. If you have a database that has its own terms, make sure you also search using that database's own terms. Other. You also need to search the gray literature. Okay, so these are things that are not scholarly, peer-reviewed journal articles. These are official government reports, professional organization reports. This could also be dissertations that have not been published, in a journal. It could be capstones, our OTD capstone projects. There are some non-library databases that you can also search as well, like the Cochrane database. Also search AOTA practice resources. Again, I do not recommend using Google Scholar. If you do, document what you do, but like I said, you'll get some stuff, but you will not get all the stuff that you need, okay? Make sure you are using reputable sources, peer-reviewed articles, actual research studies, systematic and scoping reviews. Avoid using expert opinion articles unless it is all you can find on a topic. Theoretical articles can be a background article, but are generally not considered evidence articles. They're simply laying out the theory. You really want current articles depending on your topic. I recently did a study with a group that we ended up having to go back about 20 years because there really wasn't anything done currently on our topic. But you have to kind of let the topic guide you on that. If it's something like, say, falls prevention, where there is a lot of literature, you may want to look at only the past 5 years. Okay. And your background search sometimes requires what's called seminal articles, the first article that ever existed on the topic. Okay. I want to state something here. You are not doing research yet. This is a literature search, not research. You can say, I searched the literature, not I did my research. In common vernacular, people will say they did their research, like when they're looking to buy a product or whatever. It's not research. It is literature search. Okay? Make sure you're using those terms correctly when it comes to research. I'm kind of picky about that. So there you go. All right, so what are these steps in the research process? Here they are. You are here. We are just doing the literature review. We are only going to get about a third of the way up this staircase, up the first 3 steps in our first semester here. And we will, in our second semester, get up to about step number 5, writing the research proposal. Also 6, ensure ethical research. The last steps don't occur until you get into your second and third years of OT school. So we're just early in the process, but it's a very important step. We have to find out what has been done to make sure that we're doing something unique and useful for the profession. Still to come, what are we going to do after we found those articles? All right, thanks a lot.